Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond Product podcast. My name is Moshe Mikanovsky, and I'm your host. On the show today, we're tackling a problem that cannot be solved just by technology and is a huge environmental and business challenge, and that is e commerce returns. Returns are now more than a $900 billion problem in North America. And the rest of the world, I'm sure it's much more than that. And as inconvenient as it is for consumers, it's horrible for brand profitability and even worse for the environment. Our guest today is Sylvia Ng, CEO and founder of ReturnBear. Sylvia has a rich background in building technology-backed startups. Prior to starting ReturnBear, she was GM of Shopify, Start's product line. And before that, the VP of Product and Growth at 500 Pixels, one of the world's largest photography platforms. ReturnBear is a reverse logistics company with a mission to reduce waste in an e-commerce returns, enabling Amazon-style instant refunds for direct-to-consumer brands. Earlier this year, ReturnBear hit a major milestone with 1 billion returns processed through their platform. Sylvia also runs her own brand of cancer care boxes called Amidura, aimed at helping cancer patients with self-care products and content. In 2024, Sylvia was named DMZ's Woman of the Year, as well as Supply and Demand Chain's Woman in Supply Chain. Before that, she was named We Working Woman CEO of the Year in 2023, Bay Street Bulls Woman of the Year in 2022, and Inspiring 50's Most Inspiring Woman in Canadian STEM in 2018. Welcome to the podcast, Sylvia.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's really, really great to have you. And I've actually seen you earlier in the year at DMZ. Root Quotient is one of the sponsors for the Women Innovation Summit, right? So
Yes.
we're one of the sponsors, and I remember your name, remember your face, but recently I met you more in person. So I'm really happy that I finally was able to connect with you and invite you to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation.
Amazing, amazing. So, tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get to do what you're doing today? I mentioned a few of the places where you worked, but I want to hear a bit from you as well.
The underlying story is that I'm kind of an environmentalist at heart. So even though I've been working in tech, I've been thinking of ways of how I can impact the environment with the work that I'm doing. And when I joined Shopify, I almost didn't join Shopify because I thought they were promoting consumerism too much.
Mm. Hmm.
But eventually, I got convinced when I realized that a lot of the essentially innovators and entrepreneurs out there creating new environmentally friendly products are all launching it on Shopify. Right. So if you're thinking of people using recycled chopsticks to make furniture or the latest cosmetics are all environmentally friendly, those are all being sold on Shopify.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it was a lot of meaningful work for me to help those brands get started at
Right,
Shopify, and that was the product line I was working on. It was helping people get started.
right, right.
Um, Eventually, I did leave Shopify, and when I was thinking of what I'd do next, I had the context from Shopify on how bad e-commerce returns are. You just mentioned that it is a $900 billion problem. Unfortunately, most of the stuff we return right now does end up in landfill because it's so expensive for the brands to
Mm.
get that stuff
Hmm.
back. Yeah, so that's how I eventually decided to work on returns, is because I wanted to make that or use my skills in tech to have that environmental impact.
Right.
Uh, yeah, another stat I can share with you right now is that there are some conservative estimates, and I do think it's conservative, that returns alone are contributing to 24 million metric tons of CO2 emissions a year.
Wow. Wow. All
So
over the
yeah,
world.
that's the fact that
Hmm.
there's landfill, and then just the emissions alone of chucking the stuff around, it adds up to an
Yeah. Yeah.
unfathomable number. Yeah.
Yeah, and returns became such a big thing, like online returns, such a big thing because that's part of the process of convincing people and trusting that they can still buy online, that they will
hmm
be able to make sure it fits them, and whatever they don't like, they can return it. So I can definitely see where the problem starts.
Yeah. Well, there's
Mhm.
exactly two, like you mentioned, one of the trends. It's called bracket buying. So the idea that you can buy, this shirt, but in three sizes, try
Mhm.
them all on, and then return the two that don't fit.
Yeah.
That bracketing is a trend that has been increasing
Hmm.
and shot up through the roof during COVID. So the stat right now is somewhere around 60 to 65% of consumers bracket buy.
Mm.
And the younger
Mm.
you are, the more likely you're going to do it. So that's
Yeah.
the first trend. The other trend is try before you buy, which honestly Amazon has been pushing as well. And if you are shopping on Amazon, you realize that in some categories, everything is available for trying before you buy.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, with between those two things, our return rates are at an all-time high right now.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
merchants that we work with, a lot of them are facing 30 to 35% return rates,
Wow.
which is
Wow.
really
That's yeah. That's incredible. And Amazon, mentioning Amazon, they actually also created the standard almost. I don't know if it's still if it's already a standard, but it's people are getting used to something and they do it with someone like Amazon, and it becomes like the standards in the industry, right? So others
yeah.
have to follow that, and it's a very hard thing to follow because the infrastructure around what Amazon have put together, it's tremendous.
Yeah, so like the Amazon model now for returns is the instant refund model that's verified at locations. Um, and they've started rolling that out globally. It existed in the US for longer, but here in
Hmm.
Canada, it's only been around for, I think, maybe 4 or 5 months.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's the model that Return Bear is trying to bring to the world so that the direct to consumer brands who aren't selling on Amazon can keep up with this. Because as consumers, we expect this now. You
Exactly.
can go into a Staples and you'll see right now it's Amazon returns, Return Bear returns. Similar model for
Uh-huh,
different
uh-huh.
merchants.
Yeah. So let's dive into that a bit more. So many sellers still they don't go to Amazon, they don't sell on Amazon, which is fine. They don't have to sell on Amazon. Not everyone needs to be on Amazon. And especially with your background at Shopify, there is all of those moms and pops shows that are online, right? And so they're e-commerce, and they need to support a very similar type of returns because of consumer expectations. So, how does Returnber get into the picture?
Yeah, so we actually help them with not just the software, but the physical logistics of
Hmm.
returning things back. So if you can imagine when you buy something online right now, when you want to return it, you have to go back to the website. And then there's usually a place where you can pull up your order. And from the order, you say, I want to return this thing, exchange that thing, or get a store credit for this thing. And then
Right.
you'll get asked, how do you want to return it? Do you want to return it with a shipping label? Or in the case of Return Bear, do you want to go to a location and instead of having to package the thing, go to a mailbox
Hmm.
and wait weeks for a refund? You can actually just get this refund on the spot at this location.
Ah, okay.
So the second option, obviously, is the primary thrust of what Return Bear does is to do these instant payouts at these locations where we verify the item on the spot, so you don't have to wait or print
Hmm.
anything out.
Hmm.
Um, so that's the consumer side. That's how we help the consumers get a more convenient payout. From the brand's perspective, after you got the refund, that's where most of the, or actually not most, but a good portion of the headache still remains. They still have to get that item back into the warehouse. And typically it's a centralized warehouse that might not be in Canada.
Hmm.
We as Canadians buy a lot from the US or from global merchants.
Right.
So these merchants have to actually ship this thing from Canada back to where they are in a centralized warehouse and then
Mm.
open up the package, ensure that the good is okay. Um, and then
Mm.
from there, refurbish, repack, refold it all, and get it ready to sell again.
Hmm.
Uh, what we do as Return Bear is save them a whole ton of that hassle by just taking on all of that work for them.
Ah.
And the main benefit is that we keep it local. So instead
Hmm.
of the merchants needing to send it back to their warehouse somewhere else, we say, okay, we are ready in Canada. Let us be your logistics provider here and send those things to our hubs where we do all of this work for you. And then the next
Hmm.
time someone buys this item locally, we'll ship it out locally here. And that's
Uh-huh.
where all the environmental and emission savings are actually coming
I
from
see.
preventing you from shipping back to wherever in the US or in the UK or in Turkey or wherever it's coming from. We
Right.
prevent that back and forth. So that's where the
Hmm.
40% emission savings
I
comes
see.
from.
Yeah,
Because we're cutting the shipping distances shorter, we're also saving the brands outright somewhere between 30 to 70% on the whole return cost.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It does create for your end, though, some inventory or creation of inventory based on all those returns that you have to wait for someone to actually, buy it again, I guess. So what's the average there of time in that someone will buy it rather than, oh, it's just waiting for on the shelf?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I can tell you're in product. um, yeah, we actually take the merchant's data and we take their historical sales and then project out for the next 90 days what SKUs, like what
Hmm.
likely product types are going to sell within the
I
next
see.
90 days.
I see.
If
Hmm.
it's likely to sell, we'll keep it on our shelf, and chances are it will sell. If it doesn't, like as in if we don't have a 90%, or if the chance is less than 90% that it
Hmm.
will sell, then we will actually consolidate a shipment back to the brands to their
Ah,
centralized warehouse for them to be able to deal with it.
I see.
Some brands do actually then like prefer other disposition methods. Like so, we do or we have donation partners, liquidation partners, for example.
Right. Right.
That's not the primary thrust of what Return Bear does. We help brands mostly with their primary resale.
Right. Yeah. So I love that. So you're using predictive analytics there to understand, how long things are going to stay based on their other data, whatever it is. So
Exactly.
it's a much deeper partnership with those sellers, and they might be able also to use that for their own predictive analytics of what they should stock and what they should even, manufacture. Right.
Mhm. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, really, really nice. So we talked in the beginning. That's how we started the episode. That it's not, and you also mentioned that throughout that it's not just a software solution. So have you seen in the industry that this is where people were trying to solve it just with software, and then the logistics part of it was neglected?
That is what I see still, unfortunately, today.
Mm.
Um, Actually, really, the industry has two kind of camps of people trying to solve things.
Hmm.
There's a lot of startups who are running software only solutions. And I think a lot of VC money has poured into that side because software margins are just great and the return to
Right.
problem is very big and the market size is there.
Right.
Then there are the 3PLs who have been solving the logistics problems from a logistics angle. But
Mm.
unfortunately, those people don't necessarily have a tech view on things and might not have the latest and greatest on the tech side,
Hmm.
which honestly isn't the biggest problem. I think the biggest problem is that as an industry, logistics has to prioritize forward fulfillment over returns.
Hmm.
I just told you that the return rates are getting somewhere between 30 to 35%. The remaining bulk of that business is more about forward fulfillment and getting the goods out, not getting the goods back.
Hmm.
So most of the business processes that logistics companies have built are built around getting things out, not getting things back. So the
Hmm.
idea that any 3PL can all of a sudden spin up a service to do returns isn't necessarily an easy or kind of given task, you know?
Right. Right.
So when you have a landscape like that where it's just disconnected pieces, the merchants are left to kind of piece it together themselves, right? They have to go
Mm.
and find the 3PL, find the software, and kind of piece together all that tooling with their own
Yeah.
operations.
Yeah.
Whereas what Return Bear is trying to do is kind of take that entire thing off the plates of the merchants and say, we'll just handle it all. We'll have the
Hmm.
software as well as the logistics, especially in the places where you don't have it that presence yourself. So
Right.
locally, domestically, maybe you have built in, you solved it, but when you start selling abroad, it's not likely that you're going to have that from day one. So being able to just look into Return Bearer and in multiple markets be able to do this at once is what we're trying to do.
Right. So it's a bit of a vertical integration that you're creating for them, and you're
Mhm.
that arm that they can use, so they don't have to stitch it all together, create this Frankenstein of different things, which makes
Exactly.
makes a lot of sense. But you probably have a lot of partners that you have to deal with, either in different locations or different part of the logistics.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, the space, I mean, e commerce itself is a very fragmented space.
Mm,
right? Even when you look at like Shopify being an extremely dominant player, in the end, their market share, isn't any more than like 35 or 40% right now, as much as they've been blowing up.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, once you understand that, you'll realize that these merchants, it's very hard to get the idea that I can have something that works for 80 to 90% of the merchants out of the box, it just doesn't quite exist. So the approach that I'm taking is also very open. The way Shopify's ecosystem is open, you can
Yeah,
take pieces of return bear where it makes sense, and if the other ones don't make sense, you don't have to take it.
yeah.
But the idea being that if you wanted it all gone, it's there for you to take.
That seems like a great opportunity for sure for Returnber and for all of your partners. When you through the process of building this, did you have this knowledge up front, or did you learn it as you discover different things?
Well, I think it's always a continual learning phase.
Hmm.
When I started Returnber, we were serving more local brands that are a decent size, but like not like the global renowned brands that you would
Hmm.
know of necessarily.
Hmm.
And over time, we started working with the large ones. Our first large one being the Bay, right? So we are in every Bay store, and they use us as their
Hmm.
returns provider. But since then, also like some larger brands in the US, say Skims, for example, is
Hmm.
someone that we work with. So as we've kind of expanded who we work with, we've obviously been learning about different challenges that these brands might be experiencing in their return space.
Hmm.
And then obviously from a product perspective, we're always looking at how to prioritize the juxtaposing needs between different segments of the market, because they do experience different things.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Smaller brands tend, especially if it's like a single founder led brand, they might not have a large enough team to kind of be verifying all of the returns on their
Hmm.
own. um,
Hmm.
but some of them actually like to be hands on still and do want to see everything coming in. um, Whereas the larger brands who have all the resources, they can for the most part kind
Hmm.
of automate a lot of it, or have a whole workforce against it, and they don't need to dig into every single thing.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine this day and age when a lot of them have to have both physical and online stores, that they already kind of figure out a bit part of it, like how to check the returns and stuff like that. So, like you were saying, they have a team that does that. It's more about the logistics behind the scenes that no one actually see, and like you mentioned earlier, where things are, how things are moving from one place to the other, that you make things much simpler and much for them, and much more environmentally friendly.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Very cool. Now you also this is a good segue to talk about the environmental angle over here, because when I met you last time, you were talking about that, but you're also talking about how it's not just about one solution or educating one part of the ecosystem. It's such a complex problem that there is many players that need to play nicely together. um, Tell me a bit more about that. What have you learned through the process? And I'm sure, like you said, you're learning as you go all the time. But the ecosystem is so huge, and different people have different perspective and point of views, and bottom lines that they have to deal with. How do you see us solving this environmental crisis that we're facing?
Well, you're actually touching on a huge belief of mine, which is that we can't solve environmental problems without also making sure that the stakeholders involved, like the humans involved, also have their kind of concerns solved. Because unless you
Mm.
do both at the same time, it kind of goes nowhere.
Hmm.
So when you look at returns, I've just described this, right? It's inconvenient for the consumers, it's extremely unprofitable for the brands, and a big headache, and then it's bad for the environment.
Yeah.
The belief of mine is that you have to solve all three. It can't just be one
Mm.
or the other. You literally have to do all three at the same time with that solution for it to go anywhere. And that is
Mm.
how Returnberry has been designed. We are end to end in order to address all three things, um, so that you have a kind of complete solution, and it's a win-win-win,
Hmm.
essentially.
Hmm. That's
Yeah.
yeah. So your vision is not just in one of those areas. Your vision is really encompassing all three of them, and you
Yeah,
always like one big north star that that has to be kind of looked into all three and see how can we make it a win-win-win for everyone.
exactly. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not like, like you if you look at the data in the industry, we as consumers are caring more and more about the environment. I think McKinsey published a report last year where they were again surveying consumers and saying, like how much do you look at environmental products or environmental kind of emissions when you're picking where to buy and who to buy from, and it's a trend going in the right direction, as in consumers are caring more and more.
Hmm.
But the kicker is when there's a follow up question that says, does that matter to you more than the cost of the product?
Mm.
Unfortunately, it's that most people are saying, no, the cost
Hmm.
matters more to me
Hmm.
than the environmental piece. So when you have the information that way, you realize, again, like you can't just look at the environment and
Hmm.
solving that when right now like a lot of consumers are feeling very pinched. They have gone through a few years of inflation now. They
Yes.
can't afford necessarily everything that they want.
Yes.
um, yeah, so the idea of bringing the cost, the returns down for the brands so that they can connect with their consumers and build a loyal base while at the same time benefiting the environment is really where it needs to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to look at that, and great vision there. So I really looking forward to see where is it moving in the future. And when we're talking about technology and how technology is part of that environment, where do you see the
Mhm.
technologies a bit more? I don't know if adoptable more. Is it on the consumer side, or is it on the merchant side, or is it really quite even between everyone?
Oh, you're talking about adoptability, eh? Like, are you thinking
Mhm.
of what might be preventing people from adopting that
Yeah,
technology?
because in general, that's also part of like making products successful is that people do see the value in it and they start adopting it. So as consumers, we're consuming things, and we talked before about we're adopting all of these methods that Amazon is pushing on us, for example, right? And we're getting used to that.
Mhm.
Organizations sometimes it's a much harder thing to change them and to make a dent in the way they do business.
Oh, that is interesting because I see a lot of technology that's out there, and it's almost like it's a chicken and an egg thing. I can't tell. I
Mm.
don't know if I can pinpoint necessarily what might be
Mhm.
stopping some of that adoption.
Mhm.
For example, the AI that we have available for trying clothing on, that in
Right.
theory can lower a lot of our return rates.
Hmm.
Um, have brands been able to adopt it as fast as they possibly can? I don't know, but like I mean, there's so much. How do I say it? Like I think we haven't necessarily gone through enough of the or sorry the leading edge of the technology is still way ahead of what we've been able to try out to see what would work and what wouldn't.
Interesting. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
like so for example, like I was talking to a fellow who has an AI app for trying clothing on, and I was
Hmm.
asking him whether we're close to being able to solve for that problem for one of my clients, like Skims that I just mentioned, which
Right.
has essentially undergarments. The idea that you can use AI to try on undergarments on your own body requires that you feed data, essentially practically naked photos of yourself into
Yes.
this AI. Is
Yeah.
that going to ever happen?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
I I don't know. So you see
Yeah.
what I mean? It's a little bit conflated. Is that the brand or the consumer or both that's
Yeah.
preventing this? Or is it the lack of understanding of where AI can potentially get past this problem? Like, does it have to have
Mm.
that photo in there? I don't know. So I
Yeah.
guess maybe I'm saying a lot of the potential tech that we're seeing very specifically for AI, it might be a
Hmm.
little too early for us to tell.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there is one big thing that has been on my mind, which is actually robotics for physical movement of goods.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
I
Mhm.
It's very interesting because a lot of people, I get asked a lot of times, well, why or when would return bearer presumably replace the humans that we're using for verification of the returns?
Right.
Because if you're talking about the Amazon model or our model, it is right now you're handing that item over to a human, and a human is verifying that this sweater is the gray striped sweater that you were supposed to return, and
Mm.
it doesn't smell, and there's no
Mhm.
damages.
Right.
Visually, it looks complete. There is a lot of questions of when can that be replaced by, quote
Mm.
unquote, AI.
Yes.
The
Yes.
reality is that the image processing and the machine learning to identify this shirt has been here for decades, I think.
Hmm.
Or no, wait, at least a decade. It's not this latest LLM, driven
Yeah.
AI boom
Yeah.
that would be solving this,
Yeah.
realistically speaking.
Yeah.
What's preventing us from using that? And I would, say it's practically the same problem that Amazon would have also, is that even if we got the machine to do that determination, that item is still sitting on the counter, and there is no robotics, there is no equivalent machine movement of this shirt to where it now needs to go.
Right.
You're
Right.
popping it on the counter. Who's going to take it off the counter into the box?
Hmm.
We don't
Yeah.
have a role for that.
Mm.
So if the human's going to do that, the human would have also at the same time done that determination. So the idea of using AI to replace the human in this respect, at least right now, until the robotics catches up,
It's still
makes
not there.
zero sense.
Yeah. I'm just
Um,
thinking about, the robot handling the sweater all around, to see from all sides, whether it is damaged or not, or whatever it is. Even that to me seems like still a problem that probably is not there yet, or a
it's gonna
solution that
just
is
hang
not
out
there yet.
there. Yeah,
But
I mean, it can be done, but you imagine like the 360 photography boxes. That's
mm,
you putting it in there. It takes a good while for it to take complete photos and actually then do the analysis. Whereas
yeah,
the human right now, honestly, is just still light years ahead of speed.
yeah, a few
Yeah,
seconds probably, and that's it.
exactly.
I mean, they are developing humanoid robots, so who knows where that will go? But it's still way slower than any of sci-fi movies that we've seen. So there is still some
Yes.
time for that, for sure. No, this is a
Yeah.
really interesting thing to look at. From product perspective, we always look about the go to market and the product market fit, and then what make clients adopt it and continue using it and growing it. And you've been in growth product management for many years, so this is like that's why I asked this question, because to me it's the crux of making things simple for the consumers on one end, emerging technologies on the other end, and putting all that together to actually create a change. But then people don't make a change. They don't want to change very often, especially not in the business environment. It's hard for them to change. So there's
Yeah.
always those tensions between the two.
Oh,
So
totally.
we'll see where the
You know,
world is
actually,
going to be.
you know what you remind me, or a topic that this brings up for me also is just that the human computer interaction is still completely different from a human to human interaction.
Oh, that's true.
So, like a return fraud, for example, is like almost $100 billion of its own like problem
Yes,
now.
yes.
Um, and if you imagine like these two use cases we're just describing, is it's either you're bringing this shirt to a Staples employee to actually get returned in the return bear system,
Hmm.
or in the other case you bring it to a robot.
Yes.
What we're seeing right now is that when you have to look somebody else in the eye and hand that thing over, you are practically never going to fraud through. Like you just
Mm. Hmm.
it's different than you trying to hand it off to a robot who then you can be like, okay, well, now I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, I
see
see.
what I can do to scam this robot,
So you're
which is
saying,
actually what we're
yeah,
seeing right now. When people mail in packages, that's where all the fraud is happening.
yeah,
Whereas,
yes,
well, when you hand it into person, we practically see no fraud.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw one of your recent posts was about these empty packages that someone returned to with like just the packages without the goods in them. Yeah, I definitely see how making things more robotic will increase that problem rather than reduce the problem. So I think we
Yeah.
already see that with self checkouts and I don't know, in the Amazon stores that it's free, no checkout or whatever. What do they see over there? But these are studies that really interesting to look into. Um,
Hmm.
let's move to your journey, to your let's move to your founder journey. Because that's always something we're interested to hear about.
Yeah.
You worked in the past for several organizations. Now you're a founder. You founded also a few things in the past. What did you learn in the process?
Oh, so many things. Where do I start? Uh, Learning to be more resilient every day.
Hmm.
I think the more you experience the failures, like the more you're able to kind of anticipate them and pick yourself up faster after they
Hmm.
happen.
Hmm.
Um, but I still find that one really, really hard. Like you put a lot of like your energy and time into something you wanted to succeed, right? The idea that you need to maybe potentially a bunch of failures to get to success is still hard to
Hmm.
take.
Hmm.
So that's been one big learning for me. The other learning is actually just, and I don't know if I'm really good at this still, but being able to carve off time in my day for myself, as
Hmm.
opposed to all the things that need my attention between, business, my two kids at home, um, and, yeah, family and friend obligations. So,
Hmm.
yeah, because,
Yeah.
obviously if you burn out, then everything falls apart.
Well, being a founder is can take like can consume your entire life, so it's really important. Absolutely, I actually feel lucky that we live in Canada where we have much more ingrained in us this need to balance. But still, when you are a founder, sometimes the pressure and the things coming up, they can't wait.
Yeah, yeah. The last one that comes to mind for me is actually making sure that you actually take some risks with your business, and when things aren't going well, having enough of that, like making your ego small enough that you can let go of the things that you thought were your baby and move on into something else and pivot. Uh, yeah, kind of the story. I think I may have shared that with you when we were at the retail TO talk too, right? It was when Return Bear first started, we weren't actually focused on cross border returns, um, but we realized the pain was really there for the merchants for cross border. Because you can imagine, I just described, how people are shipping things across oceans. That's where most of the costs are. So yeah, that pivot did, take a lot of anxiety out of me because it wasn't what we had started with. It would require, a little bit more additional investment and cycles building up the product to get there. But yeah, without that, I don't think I would have had the success with Return Bear that we have today.
Yeah, yeah. And as a parent, do you share these things with your kids so they can learn? I my kids are a bit grown up now; they are university age. But if so, I wasn't a founder or entrepreneur when they were little, but I can see how that could be a really interesting educational moment. To share with them. Is that something that you do?
Well, yeah, I take my kids to as many talks that I do as I can. In the beginning, when they were younger, all they were doing was stuffing their faces because there's free food. uh, they are always still stuffing their faces now, but now that they're gotten bigger, I am seeing that they're absorbing the content. And my older son, in particular, has this dream of building an electric airplane company at some point. So I can see him, when he goes to some of these events with me. We were at when was the last? I was judging some of the startup pitches at a event the other day where one of the ladies was actually working on a biofuel. So when my son saw that pitch, his eyes lit up and he got totally inspired. Um, yeah, so being able to do that, for me is, yeah, it's a good thing. It's education that um,
What an
isn't something
amazing
that he can
opportunity
get.
for him.
So, right.
I can definitely see how, getting it into his system when he's young and seeing you doing it and seeing you taking the risks, and it can be an amazing journey for him as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, perfect. What would be one tip that you would give to other founders? Maybe your son in the future as a founder, or any founder that are listening to this, like
Mhm.
one big tip.
Oh, I don't know what the one. Keep learning. It really is. Yeah. That one gets you past absolutely everything, whether it's learning about how to be resilient, about how to take risks, about how to take care of yourself. The learning part, nobody can take away from you. Like everything can fail, and all your network can go, all your resources and funding can go, all of your reputation can go down the drain, but no one can ever take your learnings and your skills away from you.
So
So
true. This is so
that one,
true. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. So from each one of those learnings, you can build on top of that. And it's really, learning is a success on its own.
it is. It
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Amazing. Absolutely. We will share, where people can reach out to you in the description of the podcast. If they do, what is it that you love talking with them or you want to ask them for?
Well, anything logistics and returns and e-commerce related, I will always love talking about, and sustainability, obviously. Um, what can they do? Well, actually, if you ever come across a sucky returns experience, I always like to know that, to make things better. And if you have recommendations for, return bear partners, which brands we can work with, or um, locations we should be at, I would always welcome that input.
Amazing. Amazing. Anything else that I should have asked you and you want to share?
Ah, well, I think you covered a lot. Main thing is, I think we as product people, as much as we can take on some social responsibility in what we build, the better.
Hmm.
Um, because yeah, I do, as a product person at heart, I do feel like we as a group need to take a lot more responsibility moving forward. Because when you
Absolutely.
think about this, the impact that social media has had as a product on the world, or what AI generally might mean for us in the future, if we as
Yeah.
product managers don't take ownership of that, I don't think we're going to be in a good place.
Yeah. Yeah. So I 100% agree with that. 1,000% agree with that, as we say. Thank you so much, Sylvia. This was wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was a great discussion.
Amazing. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching or listening to us. My name is Moshe, and this is Beyond Product. We'll see you next time.